aggressively right now, so if I stand up, that'll be better. Now, the 10 minutes time slot that was allowed, or 8, I guess, got reduced at some point. Really isn't enough to do justice to the topic that was assigned. Over 30,000 students, 3,000 odd research faculty and staff, $754 million of research funding last year. It's quite a research enterprise. So I'm going to focus really on just one element, a new unit that we've launched and I'm responsible for, called Venture Catalyst, and how we're using this unit to really facilitate a coordinated framework for innovation and entrepreneurship on campus. Before I get into the unit itself, I want to provide you the context within which we're functioning. I, along with my two colleagues, Cindy Kyle and Paul Dodd, report to the Vice Chancellor of Research, who runs the Office of Research at UC Davis. And the Office of Research is responsible for facilitating, disseminating, and applying the university's research in a manner that addresses the needs of the region, state, nation, and globe. So a very broad mandate for taking our technology, taking our research, and really translating it into a meaningful way into the community at large, which obviously includes our local community because that's where everything begins. So that is the mandate of the Office of Research. Okay. Two units that pre-existed my coming to Davis, and I've been at Davis only about 18 months, the majority of my experience has been in the business world, in industry, in the biotech space, drug discovery, drug development, around several companies, starting with a big Fortune 500 company where I was a business development analyst, and then moving on to small startups that I raised financing for capital for, including one company where I was part of the team that took public in 2004. So bringing an entirely different experience into the academic space to try and really facilitate that translational activity so we can get this research out into the commercial setting. Two units that pre-existed: Innovation Access, which is a traditional technology management, IP and licensing office. A newer office which has been around for about 4 years now, Corporate Relations, which is focused on forming more broad and transformative interactions between our university researchers and industry partners. So not just the one-off individual sponsored research agreements with individual faculty or labs, but much broader relationships, much more sustaining, transformative, that cut across disciplines and capabilities on campus, as well as hopefully have an impact in an economic manner in the community. Now, some of you probably participated in a number of committees that the Chancellor, when she came on board, instituted to really figure out what the needs were across the campus, what we could do to be more competitive around achieving the goals of the university. There were about a total of, I think, 325 recommendations once we compiled all of these from the different committees. Several of them were actually contradictory to each other and at odds with each other. But what I did was really to pull out the ones which focused on tech transfer, technology translation, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And there were really 7 of these that were distinct recommendations that fell out of this. The phrases in the parentheses are just catchy phrases I came up with to encapsulate what the recommendations were. And you can see that these went all the way from being much more strategic about how we manage intellectual property. Typically, academic environments are not strategic about IP. Typically, it's a very reactive process. Someone comes up with an idea, they're going to go talk about it, they say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I should protect this. And someone's going to file the appropriate patent overnight to make sure that we don't lose that intellectual property protection. So try to be more strategic about it so that we can actually develop strong foundational IP for startup companies so that they can go out and be competitive with the only asset most of these technology companies have in the startup: intellectual property and people. That's all they have usually. Providing the tools for company creation, what I call startup mechanics. How do you help an academic researcher that has no experience with starting up a company actually figure out what they need to do? connecting them to the lawyers, connecting them to folks that can help in the business plan, connecting them to entrepreneurs in our community, like Mark who's sitting there, that can actually come and provide that guidance and mentorship and really help achieve those aspirations for bettering the human condition that many of our entrepreneurs have. Access to funds, that's obviously critical. There's a huge gap. People call it the valley of death. I really think it's more the Great Plains of death. That translational gap is really broad between that amazing intellectual aha moment and what it takes to get something to a financeable stage. That gap begins much earlier. It begins in the laboratory itself. The NIH, the NSF, they don't fund the type of research that is needed by a company to demonstrate that something has commercial potential. They don't fund proof of concept work. They don't fund developing a prototype because that's not high science. But without that funding, without that de-risking, it's very hard to get angel investors to come in and say, I'm going to take that risk. Certainly the VCs have vanished for early stage funding. And also, to be competitive against companies out there, the SBIR grants and STTR grants. So certainly now with venture-funded companies being eligible for that, it's very hard to be competitive unless you can get that funding to do that proof of concept work, that repetition in a different animal model. So what we're doing is putting in place innovation funds. These are funds that we're going to contribute from the Office of Research and looking for philanthropic components to that, as well as some crowdfunding approaches where we will, on a competitive basis, fund translational research which has the potential to demonstrate feasibility for either being competitive for an SBIR grant application, for angel funding, or for something that really demonstrates that next step towards value generation that's needed to move something from idea to commercial reality. Economic engagement is critical. We expect that all our startups are going to be big, broad, successful global companies, but the very first steps they take are right here in our local community. The very first steps where they can stumble and not be successful happen right here in Davis. So we want to make sure that that community capital is really rich. And so actually one of the first hires that we made at the Venture Catalyst is an Associate Director of Economic Engagement. That's his role, that's his focus. He's going to be working very closely with Rob and others in the environment to make sure that we're communicating, we've got open channels, we're working to find ways in which we can be much more effective in harnessing the community capital that's here waiting to help us, as well as making sure that we're meeting the needs of the community. And I think that's something that's critically important. Networking, training programs, educational opportunities for our entrepreneurial scientists and faculty, that's obviously an important element within a university setting. And then collaboration and coordination with existing drivers. One of the things that universities do extremely well is to create silos, build walls, find ways in which there can be a single point of excellence that doesn't interact with anything. That is really the antithesis of entrepreneurship. That's the antithesis of successful business. Breaking down those walls, identifying existing capabilities, strengths, not just within the university, and we have a lot within the university, but also beyond the university. So making sure that we're working with SARA. It's a great privilege to be on the board of SARA because SARA has really set an example for this region for how you can do that. So that's a critical piece as well. So Venture Catalyst was created really to serve as a catalyst for the translation of university research and technology by driving the development of new ventures based on UC Davis technology. That is the focus. It's going to be dedicated to this. About 6 individuals, 2 of whom are on board. This endeavor, this unit was launched just a few months ago. We're hoping to bring in a director in early January, and hopefully by early in the new year, we will fill out the team. It's not a large team. We don't have a lot of resources at the university, but the idea is to really bring in people with a lot of industry experience, business experience, cross-functional expertise, so that they can really be effective in harnessing the resources that already exist around us, making sure that we can provide those types of resources which our faculty entrepreneurs don't have, because 99% of them are not going to leave the university or their academic positions, but they're going to be successful founders of companies. Our goal is to do this in collaboration collaboration and very close coordination with the Child Family Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. As most of you know, Andy Hargadon is the director, faculty director of the Institute, and this just reminds you of what the mission and programs of this very successful institute are. The way that I like to think about it is, in some respects, what the Child Family Institute does is help our faculty and academic researchers think like entrepreneurs. If you can't think like an entrepreneur, it's going to be very hard to succeed as an entrepreneur. And what we're hoping is that with a close working relationship with venture capitalists, that venture capitalists will help them do like entrepreneurs. If you can think and do, you can be successful. And that's our goal, to make sure that we can really provide a process flow to assist startups from moving successfully from the concept stage to the reality stage in creating new businesses. This is just a schematic to show that with these 3 units, the idea is that to create new choke points. It's really to open new doors and multiple sources for opportunity. It's a number of different entry points where we can take you through and facilitate how those interactions can happen effectively and successfully. This slide just provides a few examples of recent startups that have been based on technology developed at UC Davis, intellectual property, and founders from UC Davis. Some of these you recognize. And it really demonstrates the diversity of areas and technologies in which we are creating opportunities for science and research to turn into potential products and services, which I think many of these, if not all of them, will be really instrumental in bettering the human condition. That is what it's about. That's the purpose of the university. And that's what really, I think, is all of our collective mandate, as Bob said. That's sort of eloquent. This gives you a list of companies that were launched this year, 2013, the last fiscal year at UC Davis. Once again, you can see that there's a broad technology focus that these represent. Everything from biotech companies focused on human health, to ag tech companies, to novel device companies. So very interesting technologies, and they represent really a microcosm of what's possible at UC Davis. Importantly, there's a whole pipeline of companies, and I've left out their names because these they're at a confidential stage. They haven't chosen to identify who they are publicly yet. But these represent companies that are in dire need of startup space. They need the space now. If there was incubation space, mixed use, lab, office space available in Davis, they would be in there tomorrow. So, and these are just companies I know of. These are just ones that, you know, in the last 8 or 10 months, I've been able to identify or have self-identified for me. And I guarantee you, you create a type of space where even one of these companies sets up shop, there's going to be double that number that are going to be there waiting to use that space to be effective. That ecosystem that we know can develop here needs and is crying out for this mixed-use lab and office business incubation space. We have a pipeline. There is pent-up demand. This is not just a question, John, as you said, of build it and they will come. They're already here. You know, some of these folks are already here, and there's a whole lot of others that are already here. You build it, and they'll be all over it right away. So this is something that you know, we really do need. What I'm doing right now is because I don't have the patience for the 30-year plan or the 5-year plan even that was mentioned, is we're looking at a number of different ways in which we can get some space that we can move into. Campbell has been helping me with making introductions to folks who have lab space available. We've looked at some of that, and a lot of this is high-quality, great lab space. You know, what we need is lab space, office space that's close to the campus, that our faculty, researchers, postdocs, grad students, while they continue to do what their core focus is, can also go there and get something set up, get that gap narrowed, get that valley of death crossed before they're out there ready to go creative space, not an incubation space, but into the next space, that's real space right here in Davis once again. So with that, I probably used up more than my 8 minutes, so I apologize. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.